And welcome everybody to another day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. It's rainy, it's windy, it's floody. Hopefully you all are staying safe. But on today's show, we'll be going over how some people made some comments, as I was talking about school choice yesterday, where they wanted me to explain a little bit more. And one of the questions and comments I get often is over whether or not teachers will lose their jobs, because that's one of the fears we see peddled by those who don't want individuals to have control over their child's education, that teachers will lose their jobs. And we'll explain why people will lose their jobs, but it's not going to be teachers. And to point out just how bad our schools are at being, well, careful with their resources, we have a story coming out of LEX 18. A viewer asked them about how much does the school district spend on furniture. Somebody must have had a little bit of a tip for them that the school spent way too much specifically on their HR department. So I'll be going over how Fayette County Public Schools managed to spend over $6,000 per employee for furniture for their HR department. That's right, over $6,000. Over $6,000. And then we had a viewer question regarding electoral college and asking about something more so at the state level that maybe has a similar system as we do at the federal level for electoral college. So we're going to have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But first, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Make sure you're sharing the show with others. Make sure you're tuning in every day we put out a show. That's what keeps us going over here. That's what keeps the show chugging along, is your input, your viewership, you taking the time every day to listen to the show and staying up to date on what's going on right here in Kentucky. So yesterday during the show, I went over my issues where we should be ringing the alarm bells when it comes to school choice. And that is because there's a whole lot of education that has to go on into the voters to understand not just what the amendment does, the policy behind it, but also what kind of options there are out there when it comes to school choice. And I mentioned that I'd been talking to a few people, even in person, that were very confused on it. And one of the individuals I was talking to was a college student who's going to school to be a special education teacher. And he had just recently been at a KEA gathering, Kentucky Education Association gathering. That's like a teachers union kind of here in Kentucky. And of course, they were pushing out how you need to vote no on Amendment 2 and why. And the thing that they're selling them, first and foremost, is that teachers will lose their jobs, or that people will lose their jobs at the schools at least. Now, they won't normally go into detail about teachers or who's going to lose their job. And I think this is incredibly important because when we actually boil it down, teachers will not lose their jobs. Nobody feels bad, though, for the school administrators. Just about everybody believes the school administrators are paid too much. There's too many of them, because factually there are. And as we've seen more and more money going into our K through 12 education, we've seen it not going to teachers, but instead going to the administrators. We'll have a story today talking about that. And everybody kind of recognizes, we've too many administrators. Now, nobody ever asked the question, why is it that a private school, even some of the high-class, full-service private schools, take, for example, here in Lexington, we have Lexington Catholic or Lexington Christian Academy. Both are what I'd call full-service schools. They have full-fledged buildings. Of course, they have class grade sizes that are somewhere around 160, 200 students or so a grade at least, if not more. They have full sports facilities with fields. They have full sports teams that you can take part in. They have a gymnasium. They have auditoriums you meet in. They have guidance counselors. They have all the things that you would normally expect from a standard normal school, at least if you generally interact. They even have programs to help kids that need a little extra special help as well. And they do all this. And while at like LCA and Lexington Catholic, you'll see tuitions and total costs, even with sport fees, ranging somewhere around maybe $13,000 to $14,000 a year. But when you take a look at public schools, Fayette County Public Schools, for example, you'll see an expenditure of $22,000 a year per student. Now, some people would mark that up to a few different things, including transportation, something that private schools don't have to provide, transportation to and from the schools. But even with the state now fully funding that transportation, we get a better look at how much it is per student, and it's only a few $1,000s a year is the transportation cost. So even if we add that to the 14, 15,000, maybe we arrive at 17,000 on the high side. That still doesn't explain $5,000 per student. So why is it that these private schools are able to provide better education with full service schools even? They didn't cut out all the extras and spend $5,000 less per student. And the answer, of course, comes down to the administrative costs. The bigger schools are, the more administrators they have, of course. That's just natural. You have to have managers on top of your managers, on top of your managers, on top of your managers, right? It's the same reason why bigger companies have a little bit more overhead. They tend to be a little bit more expensive sometimes to use than maybe a locally owned company that just doesn't have the same amount of overhead. They don't have the same amount of people that have to make money off the same job. But also, you see this growth because you create jobs. You have unnecessary expenses. And we've seen this time and time again, and as I said, we'll have a story today covering this. But that growth of the administrators, that is why private schools can do the same job for cheaper. Because some people would even bring up, we hear people talk about the like special education school, like inside public schools, and we talked about this when we talked about the Raceland-Worthington incidents, where a special education teacher was abusing children, where kids who have special needs that the private schools don't have to take on. But there is special needs private schools in Kentucky. And so, for an example, one of these private schools is the Pitt Academy. It's a private school in Kentucky. It's been around for 75 years that deals specifically with special needs students. And it's got two different tiers based upon the needs of the student, based upon how much specific hands-on help do they need. And Tier 1 tuition is $16,432 per student. Tier 2, $18,512. Now you'd say, wow, that's a fair amount. But remember, how much is Fayette County Public Schools spending per student? $22,000 to $23,000 a year. Louisville's even more, and they want to blame it on, well, it's because of special needs kids. But somehow you have private schools having to stand on their own, not getting a whole lot of help from elsewhere outside of private, maybe donations, but having to stand on their own, able to charge $4,000 or $5,000 less than Fayette County Public Schools spends for their average student for special needs kids. So this whole entire selling point that, well, the special needs kids, they just cost more. So yes, it's more per student, but we end up paying that more because we have transportation, and we end up paying that much more because we end up with having kids, special needs kids, and they need extra help. And so that costs more per student, but that gets spread amongst the student body. That story, both those stories don't check out. There's not enough cost in transportation to explain the difference. And when we take a look at special needs private schools, we see they're also doing it for cheaper than their all-in cost per student. Based on private schools, if they had to take special needs kids and regular kids, let's say a private school that takes both, set up exactly the same way as our public schools would be, even with transportation, your average spend per student, you could easily see right around $15,000 to $16,000 a student, somewhere like Lexington, Kentucky. Far less than the public schools spending in that county. You got to compare those local publics, because I know there's public schools out there that only spend $13,000, $14,000 per student, but they also have lower cost of livings, so they pay everybody at the school less because it's proportionately the same, but they have a lower cost of living in the area. That makes a lot of sense. So my point of pointing all that out is when people talk about, well, you know, the schools are going to lose their funding. They're going to close up. They're going to not be able to educate kids. It'll hurt education. What will happen is students will go elsewhere. They will still need to be taught. Teachers will not lose their jobs. If anything, teachers will see an increase in pay because now there's a competition on the marketplace for their labor. But who does lose their jobs is the administrators, because that's where the costs are. That's why private schools, even ones handling special needs kids, can operate for far cheaper than comparable public schools, because they don't have that administrative cost overhead. So yes, people will lose their jobs with school choice, but it ain't going to be teachers. It ain't going to be the janitor. It ain't going to be the cafeteria workers, because their jobs will continue. Schools will need teachers and people to clean up after the kids and cafeteria workers. They will all need it. They're not losing their jobs. Who will lose their jobs is the admins. And let me ask you this, don't they deserve to? When we look at the results of our public schools, don't the administrators deserve to lose their jobs? The results are horrific. All they do is suck money out of the system, and they're horrible at their jobs, and they're wasteful. And for example of just how wasteful they are, we need but look at the story from LEX 18 talking about Fayette County Public Schools and their ridiculous expenditures on furniture. So LEX 18 went about investigating some recent expenditures on furniture. And what they found was they took a look at the HR department of Fayette County Public Schools. Now, just real quick, Fayette County Public Schools has 2,836 support staff, 3,129 full-time teachers. They almost have the same amount of staff other than teachers at Fayette County Public Schools as they do teachers. Literally, the teacher-to-student ratio would be, if everybody was a teacher, the student-to-teacher ratio would nearly be half. In what world do you need more people or the same amount of people who aren't full-time teachers than you need teachers at a school? But besides that, the HR department, 42 employees, this year they spent on total to redo the HR department $260,000. Now, not to remodel it per se, but to purchase furniture. Just to purchase furniture, $260,000. That works out to $6,190 per employee for furniture in the department. What'd you do? Get them a matching bedroom set and a sectional to go with their desk? Did everybody get a diamond-encrusted nameplate? Is their desk coated in gold? $6,200 per office, per employee. That's not even per office, because I'm sure they have some cubicle pins. That's per employee. Are they sitting on thrones? Now, being called out for this by the district, Fayette County Public Schools tried to defend itself, or LEX 18 asked them, like, look, how do you defend this? This is like a lot of money. They said, well, we used it to streamline the process, and it was a good return on investment because now we have no openings. We started out this year with no staff openings. So first, we've been told time and time again that our public schools just need more money to pay people more because, you know, if they could pay teachers more, they would not have troubles with staffing and yada, yada, yada. But here, HR department is of Fayette County Public Schools claiming they didn't have a single vacancy starting out the year. So which is it? Do we have teacher vacancies and we need to shell out more money for it in order to solve our educational problem? Or is it 100% staffed and that means we're paying just fine? If we're able to start the year off without a single vacancy, that means you're paying very competitively because you have no openings. Now, I thought paying teachers enough was a big problem. Apparently, Fayette County Public Schools didn't have that issue. Kind of a conflicting story, right? So they claim that they started out no vacancies, and it was because of what they're being asked about. The logic they're saying here is because we spent $6,200 per HR employee for furniture is why we had no openings. And LEX 18 ask them, what would you say to people who still might question if the spending was necessary? And the response from Fayette County Public Schools was, I'd love for them to experience what our new employees get to experience. In order for us to provide the services needed to our students, we have to have high-quality staff members to help recruit and retain them. So is what Fayette County Public Schools here claiming is that, hey, look, we had to streamline the process, and they went on to explain you had to go to different offices and different buildings for all this. So, okay, you put them all together. I get that, in the same place, and that's going to have some costs. Right? They said it used to take 30 days, now it takes 5. Okay, I get all that. And maybe that has some costs. You got some moving costs, some setup costs. I get that. But $6,200 per employee? And then you say, well, that's, that obviously good money spent because we had no vacancies. Is what Fayette County Public Schools, is what they're claiming what happened is that employees, would-be employees, a person signing up to be a math teacher would walk in there and say, hey, I'm here to teach math, and then look around and say, oh, no. Is that desk 2 years old? Well, I can't work here with a 2-year-old desk. Has that desk been moved from where it was initially put when it first purchased? And you didn't buy a new one when you rejiggered the place? Well, I can't work here. I can't work for a school district that has 2-year-old desk. And I'm saying 2-year-old desk because the building itself that they're talking about is only like 6 years old. Fayette County Public Schools bought that building, I do believe, in like 2019, 2018 was about the soonest time they moved into that building. So the furniture in there now can't be that old. And they're sitting there saying, oh, the only reason why we had no vacancies was because we spent $6,200 per employee. Now, of course, that's BS. Everybody can smell that's BS. That's ridiculous. And LAX 18 said, this is ridiculous. And asked them about a specific office as they're trying to defend their expenditures. And this tells you the problem. This tells you why school choice is the answer. This tells you how they're wasting this money. Remember, Fayette County Public Schools, the school we're talking about here, canceled art program due to funding at an elementary school. And here we find out this very specific. LEX 18 was very interested about a specific $16,000 spent for a former administrator's office. And they wanted to see that specific office. They said, hey, can we see that office? We'd be real interested. And they were told, I'm not kidding you. They were told by Fayette County Public Schools that the admin no longer works there and the office is used for something different now. So they said, what'd you spend $16,000 on? They said, well, we can't show you that because now the office is used for something else. So what happened to the $16,000 in furniture? Are you telling me that you spent $16,000 to redo an office? We walk in there and now you've undid everything? You just spent this money. And they're asked, okay, what specifically did the $16,000 go to? Then they said, you're going to have to fill a new open records request to ask that. LEX 18 files the open records request, and what they got back was invoices so vague, they still don't know what Fayette County Public Schools spent $16,000 on. Y'all, they are canceling art classes at elementary schools due to supposed funding. And yet they're able to drop $16,000 on one office that they don't even use as an office anymore. We wonder why we need school choice to get these schools in order. We wonder why people support it. Absolutely ridiculous. So finally, I had a viewer question about doing an electoral college style system within the state. Now, I want to explain real quick why we have an electoral college. And that is because at the federal level, and that is because we, as a country, are not a democracy, we're a republic. And the entire idea behind the Electoral College was twofold. One, and people don't want to talk about this, but it's honest, the founders were worried that the voters would be duped into voting for somebody awful because somebody would come along, make all kinds of promises they couldn't keep, and then trick all the voters into voting for them. That was part of the reason why the Electoral College was brought up. But the other reason why the Electoral College was brought in is because we are a republic and not a democracy. We were not set up to be one country in the same way other countries were set up. We were set up to be United States. And the states had more sovereign power than the federal government did. That was kind of the point of everything. We were sovereign states that were coming together. And the point of the Electoral College was to make sure a raw population couldn't override the rights of individual states or override the rights of individuals even. That it doesn't matter what the majority says because individuals and states had rights. Basic idea. And so that was the point of the Electoral College. That's the point of it, continues to be the point of it, is to make sure a state like New York and California, just because they have sheer more population, ends up getting to dictate what large swaths of like farmland end up doing because they don't know what's best for them. They don't understand what goes into it. They understand everybody has their own spheres of knowledge, of influence. And so that's part of why they did it. So the question was, should we do something at the state level, worried that perhaps, there would be a issue with the governor elections into the future, perhaps. To which I say, I think it'd be a bad idea for this reason. One, the Electoral College system was divided up by states, who then go in and represent the Congress and get cut up into congressional districts, and then each state has a number of electoral votes based upon how many, like congressional districts you have. And how many senators. So it's how many congressional districts you have plus 2. So everybody has at least 3. But so that kind of tells you how it's added up. That's how you reach the 538. Also too, you got Washington, D.C. is 3 electors as well. So that's how you reach 538. But instead of 535, which is how many senators plus Congress people there is. Anyways, the point is that was how it was distributed. Well, the question then would be, how would you distribute electoral votes at a statewide level? Would it be based upon House district? Would it be based upon Senate district? But, generally speaking, you would think it would kind of turn out to be generally the same. I mean, obviously there'd be turnout questions, right? But generally be the same because the House districts and the Senate districts within the state are already divided up based upon population. Remember what I just said, that every state would be guaranteed at least 3 electoral votes in the federal electoral college system because you get 2 for your senators, and then you have at least 1 congressperson. So you'd be guaranteed 3. But at the state level, if you were, you would have to just do it by population. You can maybe do it by Senate district. But still, Senate districts are already divided up by population. There's no extra little bit every region would get. And if you did, it would just all equal out then to be the same, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's making sense. So I think it'd be hard to cut it up. I understand the concern of, once again, you start to get blue areas like Lexington and Louisville that don't understand what's going on out in the rural areas. We've seen this on particular issues that I pay attention to as a sportsman is things like hunting seasons, hunting regulations. You start to get liberal people kind of dictating it. We saw this in New Jersey where a bunch of liberal people are like, we can no longer kill the bears, save the bears, can't kill the bears. And within a few years, bear season came back when the bear population got out of control and was wreaking a lot of havoc. You see this in other places where you have regulations on hunting per se that are set by the more liberal areas that don't understand what kind of havoc some of these animals can wreak. In the rural areas, on the farmlands, how they get in the way, how they eat up resources, the management side of resources. So that's a problem you see. So I understand the concern about whether or not, about allowing these liberal centers start to dictate what rural areas do. However, 1, I don't know quite how you'd cut it up. And then 2, well, then you start getting, the argument would then be, even at the county level, do you split it up electorally there as well, where it's not as much based on population, but lines you're drawing in the sand? Because remember, too, the state lines that were drawn, there's an arduous process that went into drawing the borders of the states, a lot of natural borders. And don't get me wrong, there's arduous processes that went into drawing county lines. And so perhaps you could divide it up on the counties and award each county one electoral vote in order to vote for the governor. And then you'd end up with swing counties and different districts. And I think it'd be interesting to see how that would turn out. My initial reaction is no, I'm not really for it, especially in states like Kentucky, where the state government it's very, I would guess I'd call it very accessible still. Your average House rep, your average state senator, is only elected by, relatively speaking, a handful of people. Because keep this in mind, right? So your average congressman's primary has, 100,000, 150,000 or so primary votes in it on the high side if you're a Republican in the state. But your average state House rep, who is a check on the governor, keep that in mind. So that kind of helps defend some of the electoral checks here, is that you do have a check on the governor from the legislature that is elected locally. They have like 2,000 in their average primary, 3,000 on the high side, and an average state House rep primary that's really only a handful of people. So you already have a pretty good check. And I think the electoral college system at the federal level is good because the federal government has grown with so much power. And so it's hard for individuals concerned, small constituencies of people to get their voices heard. But the state level, where it's more local and you have less of a population that the individual is overseeing, I think it's easier to get your voice heard. And so I don't think it's as necessary for an electoral college system. Well, there you go. Hopefully I discussed it a bit, but that's what we got time for today. Everybody stay safe. Try to stay dry. We'll be back here Monday. Hope you have a great rest of your day.